Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all. Welcome to our fireside chat with Dr. Jolie Gutentag. Thank you, Yali Wang, for the introduction to this. We're very happy to be here today to bring this topic to you. That is a very important topic. And we felt that we wanted to do a deep dive into the circular economy and sustainability. And Dr. Gutentag is an expert in this. I think Yali already introduced her somewhat, and I would like to share my screen. Where did that go? And go into some more information about her there. I'm going to go right ahead and take up the whole space. So this is Dr. Gutentag. So she has had a really long and prosperous career in business and in management positions in Procter Gamble, Nestlé, Ranir Healthcare, in marketing, product innovation, general management, and also CEO of Tempo Electronics and semiconductor packaging company that she then sold to Advantech. And what I wanted to bring out is that on top of having this really incredible past and incredible experience in business, in global management, she also has had a turnaround at a certain point in time that it would be wonderful if she probably could just speak to that on her own. But that is what set her up to really dive in and do her doctorate on the circular economy and the driving consumer engagement in sustainable behaviors versus continuing a typical business path. And that is how then she became professor at Pepperdine University and at Sophia University, and where she's been doing research. So I'm going to give the floor over to Dr. Gutentag so that she can speak a little bit more to that, her experience, and why she is here speaking about sustainability and the circular economy. And then she will give you a really wonderful deep dive into the topic. Dr. Gutentag.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction. I'm really glad to be here. Yes, I think that is a great explanation of my journey. I have extensive business experience, mostly in Europe. I'm American, but I'm married to a German. So I spent 25 years in Germany, and my career was across Europe. The Europeans do things a little bit differently in terms of sustainability versus the US. And it helped to change my mindset. One of my jobs was to bring to market and drive and grow a meat-free product. So it's become quite big here to use sustainable meat-free products. And that sort of got me interested into the topic. And when I did my doctorate, I decided that I really do want to make more of a change and a shift and focus on doing business for good. So at Sophia here, I do teach the Global Leadership and Sustainability Program, and I do teach a certificate program as well on helping businesses have more sustainable business practice. So I'm passionate about it. I would love if you have any questions later, we can dive into that as well. And you'll see a little bit what my work is right now. I really do kind of approach it from, at least my research, from a little bit of a marketing perspective in terms of how can we get consumers to behave more sustainably. So let's talk a little bit. What I'm going to present to you, I wanted to start talking a little bit about sustainability first, because I think that the circular economy is actually a better substitute for the environmental side of sustainability, both from a consumer point of view and also from a practical and executional point of view. So I want, actually, my mission is to get the world, the consumers, the politicians, the company to start thinking of circularity, right? And they're already doing that in Europe, but I think we have a long ways to go across the rest of the world. So I start with this very American point of view, because that is where kind of I've done my research and focused on how we can make this change, where they really say that the social, Milton Friedman, this is how I grew up in my MBA. When I did it, I was taught this, that the social responsibility of a business is to increase profits, right? It was not to think about society. It was not to think about the environment, but rather if you made profit, this would benefit society the most, right? We have since learned that that is not necessarily the case. And consumers are actually changing their minds, right? They don't want, they're not necessarily willing to change their behavior, but at least their mindset is that they want businesses to start doing some good, right? So we see that 63% are looking for businesses to take the lead on social and environmental change, not governments, but businesses. 78% want companies to address social justice issues. And 87% say they're willing to buy a product or a service based on the company's advocacy concerning a social matter. And 76% would decline to do business if they felt that the company was not ethical. So people's mindsets are shifting, right? They want companies to take action. They don't always put their money where their mouth is, right? And we as business people and marketers really need to think about how to convince them to do so. But the mindset shift is definitely shifting. This is all US. These are US figures. So this is kind of a US perspective, and these are US figures. Okay, so let's really actually step back and understand what is sustainability, right? Sustainability is not actually that old of a concept. And it's really where it came to life was at the Brundtland Commission, where they defined the whole concept of sustainable development. And they said that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we're not using up all the resources, creating all the, ruining the world so that our grandchildren cannot live in it or their children cannot live in it. That we need to be aware that we are caretakers. We are given this beautiful earth to live on. Our job is to take care of it, and to pass it on to the next generation in as good of shape as we received it. So that's really the focus, is thinking about the way we consume, the way we do business, the way we live our lives. We're not just focusing on ourselves, but we're thinking about what happens to the future generations. So if you look at sustainability, as you might have learned, there's 3 pillars of it, right? Everybody seems to always think of environment, right? When you say the word sustainability, automatically people think of the environment. Nevertheless, there's 3 parts of sustainable development. That's environmental, social, so we worry about people and their well-being, but we're also worried about economic development, right? We always tend to think that sustainability is unbalanced, right? That whatever we do something that is sustainable, it will not be profitable. It will not help our business grow. It will take away from that. And that's just a mindset that I would like to debunk. That is not correct, right? If you need to do it thoughtfully, but actually you can think of sustainability in your business as a type of innovation, something that's going to bring you forward, that's going to give you an advantage versus your competition. So that's the mindset that I like to have with sustainable development, and not that this is not balanced, and that, if I do something for the environment, I'm going to actually, deteriorate my economic development. Okay, so a little bit very, very quickly about the science, because a lot of people are not certain about the science behind sustainability, and the existence of it. So here is really the rock star of sustainability. His name is Johan Rockström. He is from Sweden, and he's been working on this topic for, I think, 25 years. I had the pleasure of seeing him speak in France, and he's really amazing. And what he has done with his team is he has defined planetary boundaries, right? And these are boundaries that we need to live in so that we do not destroy our Earth, right? So these are the thresholds to the Earth systems that should not be exceeded, right? And once one of them has been exceeded, they start all tipping and then things start going downhill. So it's really about how do we balance human output from the way we live and nature's ability to regenerate itself.
Somebody raised their hand.
Yes, please.
Is there anybody that has a question? Maybe there's a way to find out.
Is there a chat with the question?
If not, maybe they can send me the question if there is one. So we'll just continue, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll get them on this end and then just work through them little by little. Yes, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah. So again, if you think of the way, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we talk about the circular economy, the Earth also, there's outputs from the way nature exists, right? So there's nature, there's animals, there's plants, there's things like that, but everything is actually always regenerating itself so that the Earth maintains its balance, right? Now that humans have come in and that we have increased the way our outputs and the way we live and the stress that we give on the Earth, right? Nature is not able to actually regenerate itself quickly enough to compensate for the way we live. So, whoops. We got stuck.
We got stuck.
Okay, there we go. So here are the planetary boundaries that have been defined. We see one of them is climate change. We need to keep the temperature of the Earth. We should not go above a certain change in temperature, which we'll talk a little bit about. We have the use of fresh water, the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, atmospheric aerosol loading. We also have, I'm sorry, I can't read this. Oh, biodiversity as well, right? So, and then we have the ozone depletion, and then the changes in the use of land. So things like forests, okay? So we have 9 categories of the planetary boundaries. Unfortunately, the ones that have a star next to it are the ones that we have actually gone and crossed over the boundaries that have been set to us. So again, his team has really decided on the boundaries that humans need to live in so that nature can regenerate itself. Was there a question?
Yeah. So can you elaborate more on the sustainability of science? Oh, you mean the science of sustainability?
Yes. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm really just focusing on like the, why our Earth is in the situation that it is, right? So, I mean, there's a lot more behind this, but I want to focus on the fact that, our Earth is not okay right now. And there's people who don't agree with that. So this is kind of the main scientific knowledge that is being used as a basis for understanding of where we stand.
Would you say, I mean, because really what we're talking about is limited resources and the fact that nobody's really talked about that beforehand, because we've always acted, you'd say, from a capitalism perspective, so from that American perspective that you were addressing before, is that, you know, the resources are unlimited and we can always grow and we can always make more money. And so now the science is coming in to say that no, actually, there is a limit on the resources that we have. So all these like great graphs that you were showing really, I think, are very clear on that. It's almost like a list. These are the limited resources we need to deal with from a business perspective.
Yes, and it's not necessarily just saying that this is the limit that we have, because nature regenerates itself. But we need to live within the boundaries that allows nature to regenerate itself. Once we start stepping over one of those boundaries, right? Once the earth starts getting too hot, once the ocean becomes more acidic and too acidic, once we're stepping over those boundaries, what happens is they interact with one another and things start to go crazy. So in order to live in harmony with nature and make sure that we have enough to meet our needs and the needs of nature, right? We need to live within certain boundaries. That's really what it is. It's not that the resources are limited. They will regenerate themselves. However, if we don't let them regenerate, if we're just using them up to such a degree, they will not be able to regenerate themselves, which is even scarier, right?
Right. No, but that's a really good distinction. And I think that's where the concept of regenerative economy also comes in.
Absolutely.
So we're like getting bombarded by questions
here.
So
hopefully we get to the circular economy.
Yeah, no, we will. Could you explain the connotations of sustainable development? Are there any differences or limitations across industries? I think that's kind of what we're diving into right now, right? What are the advantages and disadvantages of sustainable development in the current context of a sluggish economy? So, right, so how are all these factors, you know, regeneration and the time needed, then impacting a sluggish economy potentially? Like, what do we do from a business perspective if we're if we're, you know, it is saying, okay, maybe it's not limits, but it's definitely a different context to a business environment than if everything constantly grows.
Well, you know, actually, I think in order to do business in the right way and allow businesses to grow, even if it's sluggish or if it's growing, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but right now, the way we do business is we make a bunch of stuff, people use it in a short period of time, and then they throw it away, right? So 90% of those resources that we use in our business, right, are never brought back and reused. And that is the huge opportunity. It is a huge business opportunity. That's why I think of this as innovation. If you can figure out, and that's what Europe is doing. Europe has decided, first of all, they want to do something for the environment, but they've also looked at this from an economic standpoint. They do not have cheap labor. They do not have resources, and resources based on population growth and demand from the middle class is there, you know, there's a squeeze on it. So they're saying, if we still want to be leaders economically, we need to figure out a way to reuse those 90% of resources that are just being wasted, right? So that's the way forward. For me, that's what I am so passionate about, is not talking about sustainable development, but talking about circularity, figuring out how businesses can become circular and stop all this wastage of resources. And that's the point, is you can still grow, you can still, you know, make things and grow, and your economy can grow. That's why it's called a circular economy. And you can do it in a more efficient way. We would never run a factory with 90% of our products being wasted.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's really great. Do we have another question that's relating to responsible tourism and medical tourism? And for the healthcare enterprise, do you have any recommendations in that area I mean, that's a huge question, right? I mean, like, how do we include tourism as an industry and medical tourism as another industry in the conversation on sustainability and circular economy?
Absolutely. I think it's possible. I can't answer it off the top of my head. I will show you some medical equipment example later on that is doing exactly that in terms of circularity. I think what's important is that we get to the business models of circularity and the principles behind it, and that's where I can, that's where like people come in and maybe help you consult. That's why I'm trying to help businesses as well. It's like, once, teach the principles and then think about like which of these principles and which of these kind of breakthrough business models can I apply to my business in order to make it more circular, right? So this is more, that's why I talk about innovation, right? You're going to have to think about that. Where is it that you want to focus? And then you want to do it in what would be a very profitable way and a way that would be appealing to the consumer. So are you going to focus on the tourism side? That means people getting there and not getting there. Are you going to, focus on the health care side of it? Like what kind of not utensils, but what kind of equipment you're using and whether or not that's sustainable. So there's so many different aspects of it. And I think if we talk about circularity, you'll start getting some ideas. So that's how to do this, right? I can't think of any medical tourism businesses that I know that are doing that, but that would give you an advantage, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for those questions. Very good.
I love
Very
it.
good.
I love it. Okay. So the point I think we made here is that we have past a lot of these boundaries. And this is why you hear things like we should not go over the 2 degrees increase in temperature, the Paris Agreement, all these kind of agreements that we have from a governmental standpoint or like an international governmental standpoint are very, very important. And it's things that we should actually be thinking of because we are not in a great position. And we feel that with the changes in weather, with the wildfires. I think we're all personally actually becoming or knowing people who are being hit by this. Okay. So I won't really go into that, but just to understand that we are not using our resources efficiently. And so why is this actually, what are some of the key drivers of this, right? Industrialization, of course, right? We see a huge, after the Industrial Revolution, we see a huge uptick in terms of the GDP per capita, right? And the growth of that. And of course, that's going to put stress on the resources that we use for our Earth. Population growth, right? Population is growing, and that is putting, of course, more demand on our resources as well. And then something that is also is that we're pulling people worldwide, we're pulling more and more people out of poverty, right? More people are entering the middle class. China has gone through a huge transformation over the past couple decades. So this is also putting a lot more stress on our resources. And we expect other countries and continents to also go through this change. So there will be continued stress on these resources. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about climate change, just a very big picture of kind of what it is. Climate actually varies naturally over time, right? And the reason we say that we now have climate change is that we currently have an unprecedented rapid warming from human activities. It is not the natural climate change. We as humans are causing this rapid warming. We've had, I think, a series of like 10 years of every year is a record high in terms of the warmth, right? And the way this is happening, I think this is just a good explanation of why we need to think about, our carbon and our methane that we actually that goes out from our Earth. Is what is happening is when there's too much carbon and methane, we have this greenhouse effect. It basically makes like a big, huge blanket over the Earth, right? And the thicker that blanket is, the warmer the earth is getting. And we need to reduce this blanket, right? We can't continue to have a blanket around the earth. And so when they're talking about climate change, I just wanted to give you a very, big picture. The emission of carbon is going out into our atmosphere and creating this blanket across the earth. And as a result, the heat is not able to escape and our earth is warming. So if we can get rid of that carbon emissions, we should be able to, help to cool down the earth. And that's why there's such a focus on carbon right now, right? Removing carbon, technology to figure out how to do that. So there's so many, focus on, that's one of the biggest focuses.
Yeah, like in the automobile industry, I mean, all the electrical cars. And by the way, when I was in China, there's so many electrical cars there. It's a booming industry. So I think there's much more possibility there.
Oh, absolutely. Renewable energy, all sorts of things, right? And here, I think the share of electric cars in China is higher than here. It's about 9 or 10% here. And I think part of it is the infrastructure that is not really caught up to people's desire to own them. So that's a bit of a problem. Okay. So what are some of the major emitters of carbon dioxide and methane that's generating this GHG, that's creating this blanket around our Earth? Fossil fuels, so gas from cars or coal for heating a building. Clearing land and forests. Why? Forest is what actually sucks up CO2 for us. When we remove the forest, when we don't have enough trees, right, we do not have that removal systems. Landfills for garbage, right? That's why we need to not, figure out how to reuse our resources. Putting things like food in the garbage, that's one of the worst things you can do, right? Those are the types of things. Landfills for garbage is really creating a lot of this carbon dioxide. Then, of course, energy, industry, agriculture, and waste disposal. So these are the major areas, right? So the impact is that we have rising temperatures. This is actually, I think, this is maybe a year old, and that's actually gone up. So we are trying to keep below the 1.5, but we're getting quite close to that. Natural disasters, droughts, fires, storms, flooding. We see melting ice, rising sea levels, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, hurricanes. We're losing biodiversity, right? And all of this impacts our health, our ability to grow food, our ability to have housing, the safety for our working populations. And it's also creating, one thing that people need to think about is there's going to be climate refugees, right? There are parts of the world that are being tremendously impacted by this, and they will not be able to live where they're living, and they will have to move and live somewhere else. So this is for the US. This is the estimated greenhouse gas emissions by sector. And you can see, industry plays a big role. Transportation, obviously a big role. Commercial, residential. Surprisingly, there is so much opportunity. The person who invents the alternative to cement is going to be a zillionaire, right? Because this is just huge. And so, all of when we build things, we're not building them modularly, we're tearing them down, we're not reusing the materials. So much work to be done in all of these industries. The great news about this is that this opens up so many entrepreneurial opportunities. It's crazy, right? There's just a crazy amount of opportunity behind this for business. And even agriculture, right? So these are the major emitters in the US, right? And I'm assuming it's probably similar in most other countries. It might vary a little bit, but it's probably giving a generally the similar type of picture. And then if you look at, this is a global, actually, energy consumption, we have such a far way to go. So in terms of clean energy, we're only 9% renewables and 6% nuclear, and the rest is pretty dirty, right? And at least here in the United States, there's such a big lobby and pushback in terms of making these change. The current administration has really pushed for renewables, and hopefully we'll see more of that moving forward, because there actually is no turning back. If you actually combine this with the need for energy based on technology changes, I mean, all these new technologies that we have, whether it's blockchain or AI or any of that, uses tremendous amounts of energy. So we don't have enough to actually go around. And this is why there's being a whole, all of our grids are going to be upgraded, things are being upgraded, and there needs to be a move to renewables. And then I think this is a really important chart to think about, right? So sort of the inequality of all of this. If you look at the United States, we are 5% of the global population. Nevertheless, we account for 25% of total admissions, right? Look at a country like India, right, which has a much bigger population than we do. They only have a 3%, right? So there's a huge inequality of countries, particularly the US, that is based on their population over consuming and creating admissions that is impacting other countries, right? And so part of the thing that is often on the table when you're talking global sustainability issue is compensation, right? How is the United States or how are other countries that are, overusing, helping countries that are being affected by these issues? Okay, so if you haven't heard of these before, I would suggest you get to know these and learn about these. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have been set by the United Nations, right? And it really covers these 3 pillars that we talked about before: economic growth, social well-being of people, as well as the environmental sustainability, right? So we have things like no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being for in terms of social issues. And then we have for the environment, climate action, or life below water, life on land. And then the one that I'm really talking about right now, when I talk about the circular economy, is we're focusing in on number 12, which is responsible consumption and production, right? And remember that industry was probably one of the biggest, I think it was 30%. It is the biggest contributor to the carbon that we emit.
So it's interesting, really, because also how all of this weaves together and really, I mean, this idea that life below water supports the responsible consumption and production, like a lot of, or life on land, and especially, and what we'll be talking about at the next fireside chat, which is the sustainable cities and communities. And then it starts all, coming together, and no industry, innovation, and infrastructure also connects to this topic that you have there of the circular economy. Excellent.
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting. I would really, if I were you, I would really take a look at this, and you can go in. They have a very interactive site on this talking about the development goals. So I would recommend going in, looking at them and seeing how they weave together, and also looking at where do we stand. These goals were set for 2030. They're very specific when you go in terms of the goals that they want to achieve. For many of them, we took a really big step back during the pandemic, right? Particularly in a lot of the social issues. But these are the Sustainable Development Goals. You should know them. It's also, these are being measured. So in many countries, like particularly like in Europe, they have to report, just like they have to report their financials, they have to report their sustainability, they have a sustainability report. And these are the things that they're reporting on. So this is really like a kind of a template that is being used in the way you think about your businesses and where you're making an impact. And also, if you're trying to think about where can I add value in terms of sustainability, think about some of these issues, right? If you have a food company or you're working in a food company, maybe you want to think about no hunger, right? And things that have to do with agriculture. So this is a wealth of information and a wealth of going into it and learning about it. Go to the UN website.
Yeah, so I'm curious who in the European countries, who do those companies and organizations? Who do they have to report to? Is it the governments?
Yeah,
The
no,
local
there is
governments?
now a board that, just like there's a financial board that you
Right.
have to have financials, there's now an environmental board. So they're required to put out an environmental report every year.
Every year.
Yeah, it's just starting now.
Okay.
They're not, a lot of them are not great, but if you talk to people who are doing these, they literally spend almost a whole year putting it together. They open the bottle of champagne, it's done, and then they start working on the next one, right?
Yeah.
So it's but if they're done well, it shouldn't just be like a reporting. It should be helping you to create a strategy, understanding where we stand so that you can decide where I'm going to focus in on, right?
Right.
And so I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are looking at it just as a reporting versus having it be a tool to help them think about where they can improve.
Right. And make more, I mean, it's possible to make more profit, thinking from that perspective
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the circular economy. I wanted to give you that background because I think it's important to understand why I think this is really our solution moving forward. So we live right now in what we call a linear economy, right? The growth in our GDP comes from mass production and rapid consumption, right? It relies on access to low-priced raw materials, and it's not that old of a phenomenon. If I think about like even the way maybe my parents grew up, they did not grow up with this mindset, right? They grew up with the mindset of, my mother has a vacuum cleaner and I'm going to get that from her and it's going to last 50 years and I'm going to pass things on. I don't have a million pairs of shoes or clothing or things like that. So we have this whole like rapid consumer marketing, buy has actually created this kind of, rather than thinking about, let me buy something that's built to last, to like, what's new and improved? When can I get my new iPhone, right? It's already a year and a half old. When am I going to get my new car, right? And that is a pretty new mindset that we have, right? But the issue with that is that we have environmental degradation and we're limiting our ability to meet the growing demands, given that these resources need, some of them are finite, but many of them, they need time to regenerate themselves, right? So this is what we would say we live right now. We live in like, take resources, make our products, and toss them away. And as I mentioned before, only less, like we have a figure that's called circularity, and you'll see that actually only 9% of our goods and our resources that are thrown away from producing goods and services actually go back into production. A whopping 90% plus is wasted. And that's where the opportunity lies, right? Is figuring out how to use that 90% of wasted resources. So the whole idea of the circular economy is that it's restorative and regenerative by design. I am creating a type of economy where I am not linear, right? I'm not thinking about how do I throw away 90% of my resources, but actually in an ideal world, how can I reuse everything in a completely circular manner, right? And so what I'm focusing is that my growth stems from resource productivity. I'm increasing the productivity of my resources, right? And so this is going to address the surge in global demand. I can continue to make more because I'm reusing the resources that I had before, right? And that's what I like about this. This is a very business-minded way of looking at sustainability, right? Rather than let's just completely stop consuming. We need to do that too, right? In certain areas where we overconsume. I definitely think that. but we don't all need to live in caves and, never do anything. There is opportunity, but we need to figure it out to how to do it efficiently.
So it's not always not always spoken about, actually, this like a regenerative aspect of the circular economy. Like it's a lot of it is out there that circular economy is just about the repurposing, and that's it. So in a lot of places they do not mention this regenerative component. So where have you found that it was just by design, like by nature, you see this circle including that, or was there anything that came to you?
Yeah. So the whole premise of this circular economy is based on the way nature works, right? Nature is completely regenerative, if you think about it. So we have, let's say we have some animals, they might die, they go into the earth, they eat plants. Mother Nature has no landfill, no garbage can. She doesn't throw anything away. It is completely regenerative. So we need to think about living the way Mother Nature does,
Right.
in terms of having it be circular. That is the whole point. And so there's different ways of achieving that, right? In our economy. And we'll get into how do we achieve that from a business perspective. But the whole idea is, how do we have this mindset of generating zero waste? Figuring out how to maximize the utilization of our resources, which is a very important business perspective and way of looking at things, right?
Yeah. No, that's really good. It's just, I haven't seen it like restorative and regenerative by design. I haven't seen that before, with a circular economy, because, everybody's talking about regenerative economy. But I love this because in a way that brings in the solution as well as the how to.
Yes, exactly. This is a very practical way of doing this, right? And I'm very passionate. I really think that this is the way forward. So this is something, if you want to visit, I think I'll get into it. This one of the really big leaders in this whole area is Ellen MacArthur. And this is something that she has, this is called the butterfly design. And basically what it's telling us here, these are the different business models, is once I have produced goods, these are some of the different business models that I will take you through of how you can create this circularity. And then this is talking about really what do we do with our resources and how we can be more efficient and more circular with our resources. But this is the famous kind of circular economy butterfly diagram system. Okay, so who has adopted this, right? So China has adopted the Circular Economy Promotion Law of the People's Republic of China in 2009. I think there might have even been another update to this law more recently. I'm not an expert of how they're doing this in China, but what I do understand is that the way they're they're testing this in like industrial parks. So they're making industrial parks that are quite circular within their own ecosystem, because we'll learn you can't just do this on your own. You need a system to help you to do this. So again, my apologies. At some point in time, I will dive in and learn more about what you're doing, but at least that it's on the radar, right? It's not like the US where it's absolutely not even on the radar at all. Probably the biggest proponents of this is the EU. So Europe is really, they've moved forward with, they started out with the Circular Economy Action Plan in 2015. But the European Green Deal, which has been in place since 2021, is based on the circular economy, right? And so they are moving full force ahead. And you'll see some countries, particularly the Netherlands, is really quite forward. They even have their own law behind this. And you'll see, like, globally, we're at only 9% being reused, right? Or being brought back into to production. And in Netherlands, it's between 20 and 25%. So they've really, small country, obviously, but they're really focused on making this happen. And that's under their realization and acceleration of the circular economy. So Europe is pioneering this. They're moving forward with it. And it's not just for environmental preservation, but it is also to be competitive in innovation objectives. This has been a topic at the World Economic Forum. It's continuing, it's ongoing agenda item. And we are seeing more and more business adoption in disruptive models that have been adopted by various industries. Some of them have been successful, some of them have not been successful. As with any new adoption of whether it's tech or anything like that, early adopters are going to sometimes be successful and sometimes not, right? But most companies are kind of uncertain how to transition. So this is Ellen MacArthur. I would definitely recommend taking a look at her website. So much information here, so many examples and case studies. What's so interesting, she got into this because she was a sailor. She sailed around the world by herself, I think twice. When you are in a sailboat by yourself going around the world, you think about every single resource that you have to use it over and over again, right? You're not wasteful at all with your resources. And this is what made her really kind of, I would say the circular economy was already existing, but she's the one that has really brought this to life. She's created this organization. She worked together with McKinsey, created this study, and is the one championing this at the World Economic Forum. So she is really like the face of this. And I think from a conceptual point of view, she's the one that has driven this forward with the whole idea of the linear economy, the circular economy, and explaining how it works. Like this is what my research on. There is a huge conceptual cell behind this that makes the whole idea of sustainability much easier to understand. And that really is what her organization has done. I don't think anybody's given her credit for that, but that's what her organization has done. So this is the McKinsey study that was done in 2015. And they said that if in Europe, they adopted the circular economy, they would actually have a 1.8 trillion net economic benefit, right, from reusing all these resources, create additional jobs, and a 48% reduction in emissions, right? So the point is those numbers would probably change now. That was done in 2015, but the work has been done, studies have been done, and the circular economy offers us not only a way to be more sustainable, but also a way to continue growth. However, this is not a snap of the finger and it's not a quick fix, right? It takes a lot of radical change over time. And like I said, we're seeing that happening in Europe. So what are some of the enablers? What brings us to circularity? One of the first thing is, like, as we said, you design your products from the beginning to be circular, right? It has to be part of your design, that you're thinking about regeneration and reuse at the beginning. So you think about conserving resources in the way I produce it, maybe energy or materials, which is going to be beneficial for your business because it's going to save money. That's the easiest one. Most companies are doing that because they want to save money. You can think about extending the product life through reuse, repair, maintenance, and upgrading. So we talk about making products modular so that you don't just, when let's say your phone is, not working, you throw it away and get a new one. But if it's modular, you can take out a piece and replace it and continue to use it, right? So really, when you design a new product, thinking about all of the aspects that we'll be talking about, like of how to maximize the resource utilization. You can think about the production, the way it's produced. We think about closed loop production. How do we produce this product in a way that it creates zero waste? We have large companies that have zero waste manufacturing, saving billions of dollars, right? And then you need to think about new ecosystems. How am I going to recover the resource and create value from them? What kind of collaboration and partnerships do I need behind companies, customers, and governments? That's why I think it is actually quite interesting to see how these ecosystems that have been created in China with these industrial parks work. I would love to kind of learn about that. And then you're going to need legislation, right? You need effective policy and regulation. This is happening in Europe. They've put regulation in place. One example would be, for instance, they have now required people, the companies that make large appliances like washers and dryers and refrigerators, they require them to actually be responsible for their disposal. And so by doing that, all of a sudden the companies think, oh, I have to pick them up. So I'm going to make them so that when I pick them up, I can reuse those products. Before they didn't really care.
Right.
Now they care. So they're going to make products because it will make them money. If they have to pick them up, I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to reuse those products, right? So legislation is nudging people in the right way, right? So that's a really important aspect. Without legislation, this is going to be very difficult to function, right? And then technology, right? We need resource elimination through virtualization. We do have to be careful of on the other side of the energy that it uses. Things like the Internet of Things enable us to diagnose products that we might need to fix, right? That people are renting from us. We have remote control, service and metering. So technology is also playing a great role in making this happen. Okay, so these are the 5 business models that I want you to think about for your companies, right? That you might be able to, this gives us a great kind of context to think about it. One is circular supplies, and I'll take us through them, what they are, and some examples. Second, we have extending the life of a product, right? How do we recover resources? How do we maybe think about our product not as a product, but actually selling the service of that product? Completely different business model, but can be very profitable, difficult to do. Sharing, how do I maybe think about ways of sharing resources? Okay, so let's start with circular supplies. This is the easiest one and the one that most larger companies are starting with, right? So when I'm producing my product, I think about the outputs from one process become the inputs for another process, right? So if I have, let's say I'm producing something and I have a lot of water, how can I use that water back into my manufacturing products, right? So if you actually talk to supply chain people, they're like, you know what, we've been doing circularity for the past 25 years. Like we're always thinking about it because it's a cost saving for us, right? So it's already on their radar systems, right? So you have to think about how to recapture these resources, maybe give them or sell them to somebody else, but you still preserve the existing linear business structure. That's why it's easier to implement, right? You're mostly linear. You're just creating this closed loop at the manufacturing. But you need networks and ecosystems, right? You need people to help you recover these materials. If you're using recycled materials, how do you get those materials? And the value generation that you get from this is that you have significant savings, usually for larger companies. Smaller sometimes the cost of collection can outweigh the cost savings. So you need to look at that. But then perhaps you do it with a number of companies, right? So it depends what it is. But you just need to evaluate whether doing this closed loop is going to generate value for you. These are 2 very large companies that have moved a lot of their factories to zero waste and are saving billions, right? So this is a big movement that's happening. But again, it's a win-win. It's win for the environment, and it's a win for business, right? And that's how we want to think about sustainability. Where do we find those win-win attitudes? There's other companies, for instance, there's this company, TerraCycle. They have learned how to recycle everything. They know how to recycle cigarette butts. It's amazing. The guy who started this, his life is that I will be able to recycle everything. There's a company called Closed Loop. They are taking old plastic bottles and they're using it as part of their components for making streets, the asphalt in streets. And then the asphalt in streets is less expensive for the customer. It lasts longer. It has a lot of other benefits. So they're getting this very, very cheap material, right, that they're using to make a product that's going back into use in the economy. Another example would be like old tires from Michelin were being used for making the soles of Timberland shoes, right? So there's so many different ways we can think about how can we effectively use things that are actually being thrown away when we're making our products, right? But doing it in a way not so that we can just claim it for consumers and try to make more money out of it, but something that really is driving our business forward, right? So this is like a huge example.
Right. Versus the Timberland soles. I mean, you know, that's also a great marketing ploy. I mean, really.
It is, but I don't think that's why they're doing it. I think it's
Right.
probably much cheaper to buy your rubber from old tires than it is to get it. Yeah. Yeah.
So it actually works out.
I
in the
think so.
balance sheet.
Yeah, I think so. I think they wouldn't be doing it otherwise. And I'm not sure that they're actually like really pushing that they're doing that. So again, there's so many opportunities to think about how do we reutilize the resources that we have out there. Do we have some questions or?
Yeah, so we can pause a minute for and see if we have any questions. So we are, it's 7:30 here, so we have like 30 minutes more to go. So if any of you have any questions at this moment in time, just as always, just write them in.
Or do you
the
want me to
chat.
finish the business models? I could finish the
Yes.
business models, and then if
Finish.
somebody has a question,
Yeah, we'll take
maybe
it
we'll
then.
do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the another one that is sort of counterintuitive for business people is like, how do I extend the life of my product, right? How do I extend the working life of a product through repair, through reuse, through upgrades, right? And really we enable this by creating built to last products, modular product designs that can be repaired, creating secondhand marketplaces, and ways that people can change hands, right, of products, right? And so people are like, well, how am I going to make money on this, right? How am I going to monetize this? Well, you monetize this through premiumization, right? You can charge more for things that last longer. Maybe a stewardess positioning, or even sort of loyalty to your brand, right? So there's a couple companies. So if you look at this very expensive branded watch, Patek Philippe, right? It's not that they're really talking about the longevity of this product, right? Pay lots of money, not just for you, but for generations to come, right? So they're positioning this as a quality product. You're going to spend a lot of money on it, but you're going to keep it for a very long time. You have this company, this is from that company TerraCycle that I was talking about before, that creates, this is kind of like the milkman, right? So if you think about how we lived in the United States, like when I was growing up, we used to get every morning, or maybe every 2 or 3 mornings, I don't remember, we would get we'd have a little crate and we'd get fresh milk delivered in bottles, right? And then we would drink the milk and we would put the bottles back into the crate, and the milkman would, pick up the old bottles and give us the new bottle of milk, right? So very kind of sustainable. And he would do that all across the neighborhood. So he wasn't just like driving to your neighborhood just for you, but he did that for the entire neighborhood, right? And so you had these bottles that were being continuously reused and these crates that were continuously being reused. So this whole idea of loop here is that we've gotten companies like Procter and Gamble, I forget, Unilever, I think makes Haagen-Dazs. So these are branded products, but they're put into containers that are reusable. Like this is a steel container for ice cream, and this is a reusable for shampoo, right? And so that you can get a delivery of your products, and then when you're finished, you can return and these things will be refilled, right? So it's thinking about the refilling. And if you look, like in Germany not too long ago, that's the way we got all of our beverages this way. Everything was in a glass bottle. Every week you would go, or usually was the guy's job in the household to get all of the drinks in the glass bottles, and then we would bring them back, right? And now we get everything in plastic, and it's a little bit different, right? This is a really interesting company. This company is called Fairphone. Of course, they're Dutch, so a lot of these like great innovations are coming out of Holland. They have launched, I believe, in the United States as well, and they are on a mission to make a phone that is modular. So when something happens, when something breaks, you can pull it apart, pull out that piece, and replace it. And it's all on open technology, and so that you can have this phone for many, many years. You do not need to be replacing, because the amount of electronics that we waste, and yes, I know they're starting to reuse them right now, but nevertheless, we shouldn't be getting new phones every single year or every 2 years, right? So this is kind of a backlash to that. Okay, so the other area to look at is, how do we have resource value recovery? So we turned end-of-life products into resources. Now, remanufacturing is a huge opportunity. And I think there's a lot of potential behind that. And it's basically restores end-of-life products by rebuilding and replacing component parts, right? A lot of electronics do this, machines, appliances. And a lot of people think, oh, I shouldn't buy a remanufactured product because it's been used before, it's not going to work as well. Actually, remanufactured products are like new, and they have the same guarantee as a new product, right? So from a mindset, a lot of consumers want the original product or do not want a remanufactured product. Getting a remanufactured product is like getting new. It's a little different than a refurbished product. Refurbished products are often, they have been fixed. Remanufactured is like new and for less. So if you have an opportunity to get a remanufactured computer, a remanufactured phone, that is a great way to go, right? So when you do this as a company, you need to think about, okay, I'm going to remanufacture this. I need to be able to reuse the parts. I need to be able to assemble the product when it comes back to me, right? And I need to have a recovery system for that. So the value generation that comes from this is lower materials costs. And then you usually I think companies hesitate, like, should I create on my product also a remanufactured version, or is it just going to cannibalize my original product? But what companies have seen by having this two-tier, a remanufactured product and then an original product, that the remanufactured product is able to open low price markets for them, markets that they have not been able to be in with the pricing of their product. And so they've actually been able to grow their business tremendously behind this strategy. And I'll give you an example of that. You also might need to defend yourself against low price incumbents. And this is a good way to do that, right? You do not want the low price incumbents to eat your lunch. Then you can offer a remanufactured version of your product, right? And so then I'll show you how this kind of works with the business model. So this is an example of a friend of mine who has a medical device remanufacturing company. So he takes these medical devices from Johnson & Johnson. They were used by hospitals. I think this is some sort of like thing that they use with your heart or something like that. It is metal. They would use it once and they would throw it away. Can you imagine, like, this like beautiful steel, like this all can be reused? His company takes those those pieces that are thrown away, and he remakes the product. Now, of course, it has to go through cleaning. It has to go through certification from a safety organization, but this product is like new, right? And it's 50% of the cost of the original from Johnson & Johnson. You can imagine Johnson & Johnson took him to court. He won. But still, what is so interesting is that doctors are still hesitant to use it. It's that getting consumers or people to adopt these things and not thinking like, ooh, it's not as good, is the wrong mindset, right? So that's the challenges sometimes with businesses, is like, how do you get them to the mindset that it is as good? So this is a company, Caterpillar, right, that has these very large machines that they sell often to agricultural companies. They really thought about whether or not they should start making remanufactured products or not. They decided to do it, and their business is booming. This is really driving their business because they're opening new markets that amongst, industries or countries that could before not afford their products, right? So again, very smart ways to think about building a business with reused products. Should we have any questions on any of that?
Well, so I'm gonna take there's one that came in that's actually and I'll give you a little bit of a break too, so you can drink some water. Yeah. So can you explain the relationship between the circular economy and eco-psychology, also the relationship between transpersonal psychology and the circular economy? So notice everything that we've been talking about really here, that Dr. Gutentag has been approaching is value-based, right? So from that perspective, you've got to really ask yourself, number one, what are my values? So in transpersonal psychology, we absolutely do that. That is something that everyone has to know. It's a conversation you need to have at a deeper level. In terms of eco-psychology, well, you're not going to be really happy as a person. Your mind, your psyche is going to have a really hard time if you have, if you're not aligned with living fully in this way. So you will have discrepancies that then bring you back to the psychologist, basically, because then you have to go and work on those. And there's a tension that happens in the psyche then that is not healthy. And also, may I add that at that point in time, people also feel like they're victims, right? They're victims of things going wrong with the environment. They're victims of all these horrible things happening, like, global warming, weather patterns, whatever. And that stresses everybody out. Very much so in the US, very much so in Europe, and in other places too. I would say probably South America is another one. Anyways, and so this stress is a sign that there's a lack of agency, right? So when there's a lack of agency, people feel at the mercy of all of these elements. And so the psyche has a really hard time with that. And there's a really huge amount of tension there. So in eco-psychology, it is very important to give people some agency. And so all the things that, you were talking about and that we've been exploring here relate back to that. This idea that really in business, here are the possibilities for agency. As a person, here are the possibilities for agency. And as we look at the UN SDGs, here is a huge map. It's a meta perspective of where we are. Of course, this relates right back to transpersonal psychology, because transpersonal psychology is about the meta perspective and that being aligned with the way we live our lives. So it is whole person, whole systems, but local and global. So it is bringing everything together and understanding that at the deepest level. So then now, an example of that would be, the Taoist approach is like, is this aligned with what truly needs to happen? Is this aligned with the truth of what is emerging at this moment in time? And so you can take it right into philosophy and say, well, am I living my life this way? Are the systems around me living their life this way? How can I support those systems? How can I build a business that is in alignment with all of this, with the truth, with the way of moving forward that is aligned with my deeper self, with my inner wisdom, and then, also find the communities that are doing this together. And anyway, so that is to transpersonal psychology and eco-psychology with, the things that we were talking about here in terms of business.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think it's also like, how do we live in sync with the nature that we have, the boundaries that we have with nature? How do we respect those boundaries and not just go, well, you know what? Here's this beautiful earth that I've been given, and I'm just going to trash it because I don't really care about who lives in it next or who takes it over.
Well, so then that would be going back into eco-psychology, is like also the rhythms, like understanding. And so there's a lot of the wisdom traditions that then go into that, right? Like traditional Chinese medicine will tell you exactly how everything, every season is built out, every hour of the day. And so you kind of, that would be then the boundaries from that perspective. And other wisdom traditions have the same type of thing. But the understanding is slightly different because, you know, they maybe have a slightly different rhythm in different places and different continents. But ultimately the underlying philosophy and way of life, wise way of life of balancing, that's really what you're addressing with the boundaries, right? It's like understanding that we are imbalanced the moment we do not respect that, and that we can bring that back into balance, not just personally, but for those around us, and in a way that allows us to build a responsible business and build and impact the world and the systems positively.
And in a way that is still not, it's still allowing for economic growth, right?
Yes.
So it's, I think that that's something that makes it very practical for application.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Exactly. So go ahead a little bit more, and then we'll go on to the next questions. Or do you want to take a look at this one?
Sure.
Because it's actually that might be interesting right now. How can consumers play a role in supporting the circular economy, and what incentives can businesses offer to encourage sustainable consumption? So we kind of touched on that.
Well,
but
no, I love it because
no,
it's a great question, because that is the big dilemma that all researchers that do the kind of research that I do are dealing with, which is that consumers do not put their money where their mouth is, right? I showed you that chart before. We want something sustainable. We want this, we want that. But in the end, a lot of their actions are not really aligned with what they say. And there's numerous reasons for that. And there's numerous solutions to that, right? There is not one fits all, unfortunately. That would be great, right? Part of it has to do with social norms, right? And communities that get involved with it. Some of it has to do with just not understanding. My research that I'm focusing on is that many people are not getting involved in doing something that's sustainable because it's too abstract. When you talk about sustainability, it's an abstract concept. It's not very concrete. What do I do? Sustainability, it has 3 pillars. Like what do I do? People are confused, right? And so they kind of throw up their arms, or they do one aspect of it, right? So my research has shown, and I can show it to you, is that the circular economy, because it is built on the conceptual metaphor of a circle, everything is revolving around like circularity. We live in a linear economy. We circulate, zero waste, we recycle, we reuse, all those RE words. It's an amazing marketing concept. I think I'm the only one that realizes it, and I'm trying to like tell everybody, right? It is a brilliant marketing concept. I spent ages making marketing concept, and it is brilliant. It is so easy for consumers to get it. It's like, oh, I need to think about like this zero waste. I need to think about how to reuse things. That's a much easier concept than trying to give them like the 100 different things that they have to do, because then they can take action themselves in thinking like, oh, when I'm doing this, I really need to like think about how it's going to be reused, or I really need to think about how to create zero waste, or I really need to, so that makes it a lot easier. So yeah, one of the things is that needs to be done, and other researchers have shown it, but not using this as a solution, is trying to make this more concrete particularly for people. There's people who tend to think more concretely, and there's some people who are more value-based and are very comfortable thinking abstractly. For them, it's a little bit easier, but there's a large percent of the population who really wants to know like, hey, what is it? And something like talking to them about circularity, using the language circularity as a business, using circular language, I've shown even improves people's understanding. And when they understand it, they change their behaviors. So many, many things to do, but I think circularity will be very, very helpful in getting more people engaged and more people to do things.
Well, so that's what you're saying is basically, you know, what was missing is the education piece or the communication
The
piece.
understanding.
Yeah. No, but that's a deeper understanding. But
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm just thinking about, you know, from an Asian perspective, there is this understanding that things are whole, right? So I was just like thinking when you were talking, you know, there's the yin yang, right? And that is circular. And so when we're talking about, you know, this idea of circular economy, you know, it's just easier to understand than maybe, you know, coming from a more, I'd say, capitalist Western perspective than, you know, how you started. Like that's the viewpoint, and it's harder to move there because you don't have that whole systems understanding of balance, right? And so in different places, there'll be different types of communications needed to address where the lack of understanding is.
Yeah. So just, I mean, I can just kind of jump to this one. I think I can.
Oh, maybe you can't.
Maybe you can't. Okay.
There.
No, but keep going. So this is a little bit, if you look here, this is one of, so these, oh shoot, what did I do? What did I do?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Sorry.
you came to the end of your slideshow. Let's go. Can we go backwards?
We should go to, no.
Oh. Oh. Sorry.
That's okay. So just flip through it. Just
Let's
like
do
if you go down,
present.
if you go down. Yeah.
Here we go.
So I actually looked at some of the claims that you make on packaging, right? So some of the most used claims in the United States on household products. And then I tested the level of circularity of those claims. And then I tested to see whether the more circular they are they more comprehensible? Do people understand them? Are they more concrete? The answer was yes, right? So as things are more circular, and I'll show you the list of those.
Just tell me stop.
No, keep going. It's towards the end.
Okay.
Okay, this next one. Okay, well, back one. Can you go back one?
I hope so.
There we go. So you can see here, right, that we tested a lot of these type of claims that are being made. Reusable, recycled, recyclable, compostable. That's zero waste because it's going back into becoming compost, right? Zero waste, renewable, refillable, right? And then we looked at these low circularity claims that people claimed were low circular, plant-based, zero plastic, bio-based, carbon neutral. People don't even know what this means. Less CO2 emissions, natural, ozone friendly, phosphate free, right? And then what I found was that these are much more understandable. And then we did a test where we put it on a packaging, right? We put, this is not very circular, and the recyclable and renewable is circular. And we found that people found this to be more concrete, and they purchased the product more than they purchased this product.
Fascinating.
Right? Because you get it, right? And, you know, like how many people actually go to the laundry detergent and they're like, I want to buy something sustainable. And you read about all these plant-based, zero this in a plastic bottle, no, like it's endless and people don't get it, right? So this language not only will, or this whole idea will not only help us from a business point of view, but also from a, I think, consumer communication point of view.
Can I read the
Sure.
No. So there's another question that relates right to this. Currently, there are some environmentally friendly, sustainable products that are priced slightly higher than regular products. For example, business cards made from recycled paper are a bit more expensive than those made from regular paper. From the consumer's perspective, how do they view these products in such cases? how can we guide consumers to choose these slightly more expensive, eco-friendly products? And I think you kind of addressed that right there. It is communication and figuring out what people, are able to understand, and where they don't feel overwhelmed by a lot of theoretical and maybe even philosophical information, and then they can work with it. But here is the thing, right? I will guess that from culture to culture, the communication has to be changed.
Yes, I think there's the idea that needs to be simplified. There's also, I mean, it's a great question that like
Yep.
some people are not going to be willing to pay that extra money, right? And there is this perspective that things are more expensive when they're sustainable. And sometimes I've worked in it, sometimes the ability, it shouldn't be, eventually it shouldn't be, but at this point in time, it often is more expensive to make those products. So there you have to create value for that product, right? And that whole idea of recyclable has to be valuable enough to the customer. And maybe you need to communicate it in terms of, we've saved this many trees. Maybe that's the important thing, right? Whatever that is that you're creating value for that particular product, right? I think there's the question of being concrete and being understandable. And then there's the question of what's that value for the customer, right? It's always about creating that value.
I mean, I love that slide that you had up with, the two products and how you label them and then giving people choices. So really what Jolie and Dr. Gutentag was addressing here is also focus groups, right? So if you are working in a business and you're not sure on how to communicate the languaging and these product benefits that you're creating here, then maybe focus groups or surveys, or what other tools do you recommend?
And I think it's also like understanding, working with a professional who understands a lot of the academic. I mean, there's a lot of research that has been done, and of course, there's no one. It depends who your customers are, what kind of product it is. Like, there's so many aspects that come into this, but it's again about creating value and making sure. The problem is that the consumers there's something called greenwashing. There have been so many companies that pretend that they have sustainable products. They make the packaging green. They have all these signals that make people think that they're sustainable, and they're not. And so consumers are becoming very wary of this greenwashing that's out there, right? So I think it's about being authentic, getting people to really understand that, yes, this is recyclable, and yes, that is worth it. And maybe, if you might not be such a mass product. I mean, if you look at like toilet paper and stuff that's recyclable, it is mass, right? Or if you look at toilet paper now, like just using bamboo toilet paper and getting people to understand that, bamboo is very regenerative. It grows like crazy. I don't need to wait for a tree to grow for 30 years. I can grow it very quickly and cut it down. And this is a very comfortable way of using toilet paper, right? So getting people to understand that.
So there's a comment from the audience, like relating around this whole discussion. Only consumers who share the same values and are willing to take on environmental responsibility will actively make that choice. So some consumers need education and guidance, which is, what the discussion has been. And when the marketing costs are not economically viable, it's necessary to choose a niche brand growth strategy.
Could be, yes, it could be. I think sustainability is becoming more mainstream right now, at least in the United States, right? Younger generations are saying that they want that and they want an authentic brand. So if you're giving that to them for not double the price, but for something that they can afford, and is convenient for them, then they might take that. But yes, it is a mindset shift for many people. Many people, the reason that I'm not sure that it's just the values. What the mindset that we need to change in consumers is twofold. One, the sustainable product is inferior. That's set in their head. It is an inferior product and it's more expensive. And that isn't always the case. Right. It's often not the case, right? So that's a sort of conception from long ago when, products were probably inferior, but it's not the case now. So I think this is also something that we're fighting against with marketeers, is this long held perception.
Yeah. So it is, I mean, it's a distortion.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways of overcoming it, whether it's, it becomes socially cool to do it, or I feel forced to do it because I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm the only one who is using tree cut toilet paper. All my neighbors, all my friends are using bamboo. Like, so there's a lot of things that you can do along those, making it a social norm as well. So there's a lot of ways to approach this, a lot of marketing ways. And so you have to find the right way for your particular product and target group. But I do think you can break out of, like, I read something from McKinsey that products with sustainable claims, right, were growing at like 50% more in the United States than products without them. So there is a desire for this, but you need to be authentic and not greenwash, because you will get caught doing that, and then you'll lose the consumer's trust.
Right. So the authenticity is really important. So we're like coming to a close.
Okay, so I just have like one tip. I'm going to wrap it up. This is a really important business model that I want you to understand as well. And it's a little bit complicated. It's called product service systems, right? So you manufacture a product, you retain the ownership, right? And you sell the usage of that product, right? And if you do that, you have a strong motivation to maximize this circular resource productivity, right? So you are selling solutions rather than products. You're moving from a business point of view, you're moving from that one-time, sale to monthly payments, right? So that can be very, very attractive. Technology is very important for this. It's a very important enabler. It offers certainly an opportunity for business disruption. This is can be a huge disruptor. And a lot of incumbent businesses or businesses that are already existing, they have difficulty. They already have these structures in place. It's much easier for a newer business to come in and disrupt. So let's look at some examples, okay? Like, let's look at the story of Xerox, right? Xerox are copy machines that are in offices. So when I used to go to the office ages ago in the United States, we would have, even in Germany, we would have a copy machine. The administrative assistant would be in charge of ordering the ink, ordering the paper. Whenever it would break down, she'd have to get somebody to come and fix it, or he would have to come and get someone to fix it. It was owned and maintained by us. What does Xerox do now? They do not sell copy machines. They sell copies. You pay per page. Xerox owns the machine. They can track via IoT. They can track, does it need maintenance? Does it need ink? Does it need paper? They maintain it. They own it. So when it's end of life, they take the pieces, they reuse it to build something else. They have a completely different business model. They sell per copy. They're selling the service of a copy rather than a copy machine. Okay, so that's probably the most long-going and successful examples of all of this. You see the company Hilti has successfully moved this way as well. They provide a lot of tools to workshops and auto workshops, and they do it as well. Instead of selling these tools, they actually sell them the service of these tools, right? And they get a monthly fee for that. And when there's a new update, they will bring them new tools, or when something that needs to be maintained, they do that as well. Philips tried this with lighting, right? They rented lighting rather than selling lamps. That was not as successful, right? So this is something that you can play with, but it's a great, interesting way to create a business.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the questions just came up too, was Patagonia, and why are they so successful? So I know that you looked at Patagonia at length. You want to say something?
Yeah,
about that?
I mean, the Patagonia is just, the owner is absolutely passionate, and he's been doing this for years and years and years and years. Like, Patagonia has not been, he himself is an outdoor enthusiast. He loves nature, and he has always been in the business of having a business for good. Like, he is one of the if you're interested in a business for good, you should look into the whole idea of a B corporation, what we call in America a benefit corporation. There's a lot of principles behind that. So he was one of the original B corporations. And he has gone to the extremes now, right? He is planning for when he passes away, what happens to the company. He now, all of the shares that he owns goes into a foundation, and all of that money goes to benefit the environment. So when he passes away, all of that will go to, he says basically our biggest shareholder now is the environment, right?
No,
That's
great.
who owns the company. He's like revolutionized like the ownership of companies. So his has really come from, I think it's his passion, it's his mindset. I listened to a guy who spoke at a company, the willingness of him to let someone spend 10 years developing a product that's, more environmentally sustainable. It's that passion, that focus, that has really driven his business.
Right. And you think that that's why he's been so successful? I mean, that it just sort of, because, there are some people who are driven and passionate about something and maybe not necessarily that successful, right? But he managed to combine all of that to really live his purpose, but with a company that's extremely successful. So do you see like a secret in there somewhere? He just, he's obviously willing to take the time to develop his product at length and not just throw something out there. So it is proper product development and, understanding the consumer and also his love of nature. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it fits well with his product, right? So obviously outdoor enthusiasts are in contact with nature, and then they also deeply care about the environment. So that makes it also, it fits with the product that he's doing and the consumers that he's doing. So there's definitely a match there. But he also did not create his business overnight, right?
Right.
We always like to think that, right? But
No.
he was, slow and steady and built his company.
Yeah.
He did keep it as a business minded, right? So in the end, they were looking at, but they always stuck to a very strong mission, created a very clear and concise mission. I think that's very important, that all of the employees buy into. They understand it, they buy into it, as well as the customers, right? They love that mission as well, and they buy into it as well. So he just had a formula for success, very consistent as well, like didn't like jump around.
Yeah, so so maybe the other element here is trust and, authenticity, trust, authenticity, and building a label so people recognize it. Oh, I want to wear that. I want to be recognized wearing that because it expresses my values.
Yeah, and it's actually gone so far, like a lot of like, let's say banking companies in the US or in Europe, they all get the Patagonia vests for their company. And you know what? Like the past couple of years, he goes, I'm not selling them to any companies that are not B corporations. If you're not a B corporation, you don't get them, which is like a huge slot. So he's now in the position that he can call the shots, which I think is just great.
That is great. That is great. I hope that answered that question. So yeah. So anything else that you want to mention as we're wrapping up? Okay. How do we get companies to pay attention to and develop sustainable practices without policy support or inadequate policy regimes? I mean, I think you said that it's like almost impossible because you're educating them, you are bringing out a higher understanding of what it means. And yes, it is intertwined with eco-psychology and transpersonal, because effectively you're raising a level of consciousness there where people then understand how they impact their own environment and how important it is that they show up for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Patagonia, he built his business without a lot of regulations either, right? Or help there. So he went out and found his consumers that want that. So I think it's about meeting that consumer demand. Again, people are having this dilemma. They're feeling out of wax. They know that the earth is not healthy. They know they should be doing something. So if you're offering them an easy and convenient way and an authentic way to be sustainable, you're going to have the consumer demand. And when the consumer demand comes up, then, the systems are going to start coming into place as well, right? So you'll have to go at it the way Patagonia went about it, which is getting those consumers and finding that sweet spot and the value that you're offering, the products that you're offering. But I think the time is ripe for it. Like, it's actually easier now than it was for him, because people are concerned. It's just overwhelming for them. They're just overwhelming.
Yeah.
They're overwhelmed by their choices, by the fact that a lot of it is greenwashed, the fact that they don't really understand it, the fact that they don't know if it's actually going to work. It's just overwhelming. So if you can create a simpler life, people want simplicity. They want simplicity. They want authenticity. And if you can deliver that and consumers demand it, then you can, do it without regulation or create your own ecosystems, right?
Yes, I mean, it is like they have to be able to live the brands that, they're buying. I mean, essentially, you're also, you're selling a whole way of life with a brand. I mean, that's a part of marketing. It's at the heart of it.
Yeah.
Unless you have something, maybe light bulbs are not as, but even that.
Oh my God, LED was a huge,
it was a huge
saving, right? Huge. So, I mean, they've done a lot.
So, but that was also Philips. Anyway, so we could go on and on, as you guys can see. It's a huge topic, and we want to really thank Dr. Gutentag for coming in.
It's lovely. Talk about my passion. It's very easy. And you guys, I loved all your questions. Thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to chat. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can even reach me through my Sophia email address. So
that's probably better.
Yeah.